All right, today we're headed to the very bottom of the world, and we're also going to take a trip deep into the past. We're going to see how our entire understanding of Antarctica has been completely flipped on its head, transforming it from what we thought was a dead, frozen wasteland into a continent that might just be hiding one of the biggest ecosystems on the entire planet. So our story kicks off with a real Cold War mystery tucked away in this declassified document. What you're looking at is the cover of a huge Soviet report that the CIA got their hands on and translated back in '79. It laid out 2 full decades of intense, continuous research in Antarctica. You gotta ask, what on earth were they doing down there for so long? Well, it was basically a Cold War on ice. This was about way more than just science, you know? It was a massive flex of national power, of ambition. The Soviet Union threw a staggering amount of resources at establishing a permanent, year-round human footprint on the most hostile continent on Earth. And they didn't waste any time. From their very first landing in 1956, they just pushed inland relentlessly, setting up this whole network of stations. I mean, by 1958, they'd already reached the pole of inaccessibility. That's one of the hardest, most remote spots to get to on the entire planet. This was no summer vacation. They were there to stay. And just look at the scale of this. Seriously, this isn't just a few tents in the snow. That's a 2-story building at Mirny Station, which was their main base on the coast. It was a home, it was a lab, and most importantly, it was the jumping-off point for these incredible expeditions deep into the unknown heart of the continent. So, with this huge investment, what was the #1 goal? Well, before they could do anything else, they had to map the place. This was just a massive brute force effort to chart the surface of a continent that was, for all intents and purposes, a giant white blank on the world map. And get a load of this number. It's just staggering. Soviet teams traveled over 80,000 kilometers in these huge overland treks. Just try to picture that. Convoys of massive tractors, hauling sleds packed with gear, just crawling for months and months across this endless sheet of ice, in temperatures that could literally shatter steel. This old Soviet map really gives you a feel for that incredible effort, right? Every single one of those lines is a journey. Every dot is a station or a place they stopped to study. They were, piece by piece, creating the first really complete picture of the continent's surface, its weather, and its gigantic ice sheet. And this was truly a mission of total discovery. I mean, they studied everything. The rocks hidden miles below the ice, the ocean currents swirling around the coast. They measured the ice itself. They studied the atmosphere. They even studied their own people to see how the human body and mind could possibly adapt to that kind of extreme stress. But here's the fascinating twist. In mapping the surface so perfectly, the Soviets actually helped create the next great Antarctic mystery. All their work showed the world what was on top of the ice, but it raised a much, much more exciting question about what was buried underneath. So after 20 years of this monumental effort, they'd given us a map of the ice. But that just opened up a bigger question, didn't it? What about the actual land and maybe even water hidden below? What secrets were sealed away under 2, 3, maybe even 4 kilometers of solid ice? To even begin to answer that, you have to get your head around this incredible idea, a subglacial lake. And no, that's not ice. It's a body of liquid water. The sheer weight of the ice sheet above creates so much pressure that it actually lowers the freezing point. And at the same time, the natural heat coming up from the Earth's core keeps it from freezing. It's an entire world, totally cut off from ours. And that brings us to today, to a whole new generation of explorers. Their mission isn't to travel huge distances across the surface anymore. Nope. Their goal is to make a super precise, microscopic first contact with one of these hidden worlds, a place called Lake Whillans. The technical challenge here was just off the charts. Instead of going thousands of kilometers sideways, they had to go 800 meters straight down. That is like drilling through 2.5 Eiffel Towers stacked on top of each other, all through solid, constantly moving ice. And you can't just punch a hole in the ice. This whole operation had to be incredibly delicate. They basically had to invent and then completely sterilize a special hot water drill to make absolutely sure they didn't bring any of our surface germs down into this pristine, ancient lake. Every single step had to be absolutely perfect. So, after all those years of planning and drilling, they finally did it. They got their first sample. And the result? People were absolutely floored. The lead scientist, John Priscu, said it best. He was just surprised by how rich the ecosystem was. They didn't just find a few lonely microbes struggling to survive. They found an entire world that was teeming with life. And how rich are we talking? Well, they found 130,000 living cells in every single milliliter of water. To put that in perspective, that's a density of life that's right up there with the deep oceans of the world. In a place with absolutely zero sunlight, completely sealed off from the rest of the planet, life was just thriving. And it wasn't just one or two things either. It was unbelievably diverse. Those first samples revealed almost 4,000 different species of microbes. This wasn't some simple, barely hanging on ecosystem. It was a complex, ancient community of organisms that had evolved in total darkness. Just think about that for a second. This whole community of life has existed down there, completely cut off from our world, from the sun, from the atmosphere, for at least 120,000 years. It's like finding a biological time capsule from a time way, way before modern humans were even around. So, what does a discovery like this really mean? I mean, how does this change how we think about Antarctica, and maybe even how we think about life on Earth itself? Well, first, let's just talk about the potential scale. The area underneath Antarctica's ice sheet covers 9% of all the land on Earth. That's a bigger area than the Amazon rainforest. So, if the kind of life they found in Lake Willans is common down there, we might have just stumbled upon one of the largest biomes on the entire planet. And this is where our two stories just connect so perfectly. All that hard-won data from those old Soviet expeditions, all their measurements of ice thickness and the shape of the land underneath, that became the treasure map for modern scientists. The Cold War explorers, without even knowing it, literally pointed the way to these hidden worlds. And that leaves us with one final, just really awe-inspiring question. We went from thinking this continent was sterile and dead to proving it hides a vast, unseen ecosystem. So if just one of these hidden lakes can hold nearly 4,000 unique species, what else is down there, just waiting to be discovered, beneath the great Antarctic ice sheet?